Welcome to the Legal Leaders Podcast with Ali Rafi. Dennis Adsit is the president of Adsit Insights and has spent over a decade coaching executives. He specializes in helping leaders navigate new roles, build high-performing teams, align culture to strategy, and create momentum during major transitions. In this episode, Dennis and I talk about what motivated him to get into executive coaching, the frameworks he uses to help leaders execute at a higher level, and the specific challenges he sees both seasoned lawyers and early career attorneys struggle with. We hope you enjoy the episode. Dennis Adsit, CEO of Adsit Insights, welcome to the podcast.
I'm delighted to be here. Thanks for asking me.
Yeah, it's great to have you on, Dennis. Before we get started, you hold a black belt in Aikido and soft style Chinese boxing, and you discuss Zen meditation pretty often. So why is mindfulness so important to you?
I think these urges and desires and interests and curiosities, they come out of us. And my belief and the way I've led my entire life is to follow them. And I was interested in the martial arts when I was 14 years old. I mean, I had no access to it, but there was a guy who lived next door to me. He used to get, I don't know, some karate magazine in the 70s or something like that. And I was interested then. I was reading his magazines back then. And, I finally started my martial arts journey when I was 18. And that culminated in a black belt in Aikido. And along the way, also, I had a black belt in soft style Chinese boxing. And then the meditation practice has always been there, weaving in and out of my life, more often failing with it than succeeding, to be honest with you. For a long time, I would, I meditate every day for 2 or 3 weeks, and then I wouldn't meditate for months. And then finally, I was mid-50s, I made a commitment to sit every day for a year as part of my coaching certification. And at some point during that journey, I figured out what I was doing and why I was doing it. And since then, it's been effortless.
I completely hear you on the difficulty. I've tried to do it myself,
Yes.
and it's just in a world full of distractions. It's one of the hardest things.
It's so hard. It used to be hard for me. It used to be really hard. I mean, I'd go on meditation retreats and I'd get crushed. And but now I just did one in December, 9 days of silence, meditation periods from 4 a.m. till 9 p.m. And it was not hard.
Love it. Very interesting, Dennis. So Dennis, I saw you at the GCAI conference in San Francisco a few weeks ago, and this might sound exaggerated, but I thought your talk was absolutely electric. So super excited to talk about your career and all the executive coaching you're doing these days. But I'd love to talk about your path to get there.
Yeah.
So take me back to undergrad when you double majored in math and psychology.
Yeah. Same back to the curiosity piece, I still have a vivid memory of going into, I was in college in the Precambrian era. So let's first clarify that. And I remember you had to go in and, sign up for a major. And I signed up for psychology because it was the most interesting class I'd taken in high school. I had no idea what I was going to do with it, and then along the way, I had to take a lot of math classes because I was getting a Bachelor of Science in psychology. So I had to take a lot of math classes, and I got some good advice for some graduate students. They said, if you can handle the math, keep going. And I realized I was, 3 classes away from a double major. So I just decided to double major. And along the way, I realized that there was this thing called industrial psychology, and industrial psychology is it's applied psychology. So you take all the branches of psychology: social psychology, cognitive psychology, behavioral psychology, experimental psychology, personality, everything that psychology studies. You take all those fields and you apply it to individuals, groups, and organizations to try to improve performance. And it just so happens that industrial psychology's got a really heavy measurement and statistical aspect to it. And so that double major in math and psychology, got me into one of actually at the time, the top industrial psychology school in the country.
Interesting. And did you do your PhD right after, or did you take a gap?
Nope, right after.
Gotcha.
Out of the frying pan into the fire.
So you really love
taking I ended up taking a break halfway through, to be honest with you. I lost my way. I went right into it. I lost my way. I won't, you don't need the backstory on that, but I lost my way and I bailed out at a master's degree. And then Same same theme, maybe the theme for this podcast. This kind of curiosity arose in me. I actually had something I wanted to research, and that sent me back to graduate school, and I finished my PhD.
It's a lot of school, huh?
It's a lot of school. Yeah. And, some people get through it faster, but a lot of PhD programs, industrial PhD programs, are like 6 to 8 years. That's what it seems to take.
Gotcha. Well, it's amazing that you got your PhD in that. And then you spent the first part of your career doing a lot of human resources work. Is that
Yeah.
correct?
Yeah. That was my first job. So, industrial psychology, you want to work in organizations. HR is kind of the natural place you'd go. You can go into consulting firms, but, an HR path is often what people who have advanced degrees in industrial psychology do. So I started my career in human resources. I was in organizational development, and I was a HR director. And then I kind of came to hate HR for a lot of reasons. And I felt a little bit like I was a fraud. Like I felt like you're supposed to be this HR business partner. And I'd done so much schooling in psychology that I really didn't feel like I understood business that well. So I ended up leaving HR work and going to a consulting firm, management consulting firm. And I got there and I was doing kind of the typical sort of OD stuff and, employee surveys and organizational development work, team building, et cetera.
Nice.
And I was there right when Six Sigma came along. And Six Sigma is, it's using statistics to reduce errors in processes. Yes, it is that. But from my perspective, and from introducing it to an organization, what it is it's behavior change. You are trying to get people to go from one way of solving problems to solving problems with you studying processes, using statistics, et cetera, to help you solve those problems. So really it's a behavior change initiative. So me, with my background, I'm a psychologist. I've studied organizational change and been working in organizational change from an HR standpoint. And then I had all this math and statistics behind me. I didn't know it, but I was like a natural for it. And I became the Six Sigma practice leader at this consulting firm because I was good at it.
Incredible. Yeah. I mean, I hear you talk about Six Sigma a lot. Do you think it's something that's grown or declined since the 90s and 2000s?
It's a great question. And there's two answers to the question. So, yes, as a management system, which is what was being advanced in the 90s, Jack Welch, whatever you think of him, and General Electric made Six Sigma as kind of a core anchor of a management system. It made it hugely popular, and all these companies, got into the pool. But as a management system, it has gone almost to zero. There's no senior CEO that's talking about Six Sigma and making it a core part of their strategy. But there were two things happened. One is it's still in manufacturing. Like if you look at these various programs that certify black belts and green belts, they're still certifying thousands of black belts and green belts a year, but they're working in manufacturing, which is where Six Sigma and quality was born. So it didn't leave there. And then I would say, though it kind of left corporate America as a management system, it mutated into this kind of large data, data warehousing, data analytics, Bayesian decision trees, all these kinds of statistical tools to help with revenue generation. And so that's where it is now, but nobody calls it Six Sigma anymore.
You have the pyramid that you were talking about at the conference. Is that
Yeah.
kind of like your personalized system?
Yeah, and that's also an approach for what's an effective executive, So that's kind of different from, what's kind of the management system du jour that, people are talking about or pervades organizations. I'm not exactly sure. I have to really think about whether something is dominant. So
Gotcha. Oh, awesome to hear. We can definitely talk about sort of your style. I really liked the way that you were talking about how you coach executives and your
yeah,
focus on empathy. So we can definitely get into that.
yeah,
And so you went from Boston to Mountain View in 2000. So
yes.
what was how was that shift right during the dot-com boom or right after it?
Right. It was, yeah, it was right. It was those as it was happening. And that was part of the reasons I want to go there. Well, one of my clients, when I was a Six Sigma practice leader at the consulting firm, one of my clients from GE went on to be CEO of Intuit, and he asked me to come out and help him get Six Sigma off the ground there. So I decided to, make the leap and move to California. And so I joined Intuit and worked there for 4 years. In addition to helping them get Six Sigma off the ground, I also I was on the management team, reporting to the CEO. And then I also went on and started running call centers. So I ran their global call centers.
Interesting, interesting. And you were there for 4 years. What was your biggest takeaway working at Intuit?
What was my biggest takeaway? We had a big impact. I mean, Six Sigma had a big impact on the organization. It really it got deeply into the fabric of like understanding processes. How to use data. Data strategies for displaying data so you weren't deceiving yourself about how you were really doing. I think it had an enormous impact on the organization. And then on the call centers, bringing in some of that operational excellence into the call centers, which wasn't there at the time. And I learned a lot along the way too. I learned a lot about managing and executive effectiveness, watching executives around me, working closely with them, and watching what it took to be effective. I think that has made me a better coach because I was in the chair having to do the work of an executive, of leading, and watching other executives, watching what works, watching what doesn't. I think it made me a more effective coach. There's a lot of coaches out there. Let's face it. I mentioned this at the conference, and there's a lot of great coaches out there, coaches that I couldn't hold a candle to. But there's also a lot of coaches that don't have any real senior executive experience,
Mhm.
and they still might be good coaches, but there's places I don't think they can go as effectively because they haven't been in the seat.
Interesting. And it sounds like you did a lot of work with executives and it's also call centers because you did that at Combia too, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
So I'm a former sales rep, so I'm curious about like what were some of the biggest motivational strategies that you used in these call centers?
I love the question. Well, I think one of the things that we did at Intuit was probably the coolest thing. And so, if you think about it, again, this was 2003. So a long time ago, things have changed a lot in call centers. But if you think about it, that agent is on the phone with a customer and they have two objectives, which are kind of in a little ways contradictory. The first objective is the customer's calling and you're trying to resolve their issue, right? And this was tech support, which was where we started working with this stuff. So, and it was QuickBooks tech support, which is it's a hard call. It's a hard tech support phone call. There's harder ones, but this is way up there. So the agent is first, why is the customer calling? What's their problem? How do I help them solve their problem? And they're trying to be kind and friendly, and so the customer has a great experience. They're trying to deliver a great experience for the customer. But from the financial standpoint, the call center is trying to have that agent take more phone calls. So, and it's not that they just want to get the customer off the call. They want to take care of the customer, but they want to do it as expeditiously as they can because there's more customers waiting. Right. So we've got to balance these two things. So we came up with a dashboard metrics, which showed, and so we told the agents we'd pay them a bonus. That got their attention because they're like a minimum wage job. So we told them, so they weren't salespeople or tech support people. We told them we were going to pay them a bonus, and we paid them a bonus based on their metrics. And their metrics were: did the agent resolve the customer's call on the first call, and how many calls were they taking a day? So a customer satisfaction metric, a productivity metric. And they got paid more money the more they were right down that axis of
Mm,
increasing the one and increasing the other. Not too much customer satisfaction, not burning through phone calls and taking a lot of calls, but right down the middle. That's where they made the most money. And the agents loved it.
that's awesome to hear. Yeah, I think It's interesting how you balanced like volume with quality, because I
Yeah,
was in my head I was immediately thinking like if that was me I would like not if that was me, but people find ways to game the system, and
totally.
that's yeah. So it's interesting how you found a balance there.
Yeah.
Awesome, awesome. And then this was really after Columbia. This was it seems like where you really started doubling down and focusing on executive coaching. Is that right?
Yeah, it is. I tried a couple of startups after I left Intuit, and they they did not work out for a number of reasons financially. And so I decided that I was going to hang out my own shingle and start my own business and really formalize my coaching and consulting practice. I decided to get certified as a coach. You don't need to, but I decided to go through that training process. And in 2015, I finished the formal certification and started executive coaching and consider continuing consulting work, etc.
And what was your why behind that initially?
The why behind going into coaching formally?
Yeah,
Well, as I mentioned at the conference, I spent a year trying not to be a coach. In fact, multiple years trying not to be a coach. I don't know why I didn't want to do it. Some of that is because there's a lot of coaches out there, and some of them are not very good. And I think that bothered me a little bit, and I just didn't want to be grouped into that. But I really came to realize that coaching is not what I do; it's who I am. And that was the big shift. It's like I would coach for free because that's what I do.
yeah.
And so then I just said, well, okay, I'm going to formalize this and then start, trying to make a business out of it because I did still need and want to work.
And were you, was this your business initially, or were you working for like Next Step Partners or other types of organizations?
So it was both. So what a lot of coaches do is that what a lot of people do, like if you're a consultant, this happens in the consulting world too. So you have your own consulting business and you're marketing and you're calling on clients and you're selling your own services, but you also subcontract to larger firms, right? And that's nice because they do the marketing, they do the selling, and then they staff you on the gigs that they land. So you don't make as much money as if you had landed on your own, but you don't have to do any of the sales and marketing and kind of the administrative part of that. So a lot of coaches, a lot of consultants, they kind of have both things going. And I did that for a while to help me get started. And then at some point, I just said, I'm either going to make it on my own or I'm not going to make it. So I
It
pulled the
sounds
plug.
like yeah, it sounds like a good, like consistent approach. And it also sounds like you had success pretty consistently, but was there a moment where you were like, oh my God, this is like really taking off, or there's a ton of demand for my services?
It wasn't based. No, it was more psychological. You probably
Okay.
could tell from talking to me for 20 minutes here or so. No, it was more psychological. It was more like I'm going to either make this on my own or I'm not going to make it, and I'm going to go do something else.
Gotcha.
So I really, it wasn't like that. That there was enough business there. I had enough, but it wasn't like, oh my God, Katie bar the door. It wasn't like that. So I just
And
said, no, I'm going to make it on my own.
and when you talked about how saturated things were recently, is that more of a recent thing, or has executive coaching been has it become more saturated in more recent years?
I would say 100% true. I mean, there were not that many people coaching back in like the early 2000s. It really exploded, I would say, in the last 15 years for sure. It's really exploded. And I mean, it's unbelievable how many coaches are out there. And some are certified and some are not. And they're all over the map with their background and experience and what they bring to it. Some come out of corporate America and they have, business backgrounds, and some are more life coaches, and it's fine. There's a lot of people looking for help. They're looking for support, looking to improve some aspect of their lives or their own performance. So there's enough for everybody. You just got to find your niche and what you're good at.
Sounds like yeah, it's not a zero sum game.
No,
And
at all.
I've also noticed you mentor kind of a broad range of leaders and executives. You worked at Techstars as a lead mentor. You
Yeah.
also worked at Boulder, and
Yeah.
then you're also probably coaching executives of much larger companies. So can you talk about sort of what that range looks like?
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting. Somebody asked me this the other day. I guess this is also part of that, Zen and Buddhist training. I, um, I don't solve for a niche. That's not what I do. I don't say I'm only going to work with CEOs or I'm only going to work with C-suite executives. I take whoever comes. I trust that if they found me and if they have a problem and I think I can help them and I think they're a good client for me and I'm a good client for them, or I'm a good coach for them, then I'll work with them and I don't care what level they are. So that's just my approach. I'm not interested in solving for a niche. I want to trust life and trust what comes to me. And so I work with people, individual contributors and consultants and C-suite executives and all over the map.
Yeah, that sounds like a great approach, Dennis. Well, let's talk
It's good.
about.
It's good for some. There's some. If some would argue that that's a terrible approach, that you need to pick who your customers are. Right. This is the business thing. You need to pick who your niche market is and target that niche market. I'm not. I'm not. That's not the game I'm playing or want to play.
Yeah, again, I'm not an expert in this field by any means, but I can see what you're saying because, like, I'm not an executive by any means, but just the way that you make people feel, regardless of their background or what position they're in, like, it fired me up like crazy. It
Yeah.
motivated me. I loved your approach, so I could see how it would just apply to all people from all walks of life.
Yeah. It's. I've gotten here. I'm older. I've gotten here later in life, but I call it trusting the river of life. Trust what comes to you. Trust what the river brings past your door, and that's just how I approach my business, for better or for worse.
I love to hear it. Dennis, can you talk to me about your company, Add Some Insights? Like maybe you could talk about what the team looks like, what kind of services you offer.
Yeah. I'm a sole proprietor. If I have to pull somebody else in, they'll be an independent contractor, and I'll pull them in situations, but that rarely happens. I'm mostly working on my own. And there's three levels of services that I offer. So the first one is the straight up executive coaching, and so that typically is a 6-month assignment or a year-long assignment. Sometimes it involves a 360 or not. It will always involve using that model of executive effectiveness that I presented at the conference. So that will always be in the background. I try to balance, my clients coming to me with some specific requests or wants help with certain issues. I want to be helpful for those issues. But if I see something else going on, or I see something else that's missing, or a place where they're sub-optimizing based on the model that I use, I'll certainly broach that subject with them. So that's kind of straight up executive coaching work. The second thing that I do is I do a lot of team building for some of my clients and their teams, but also for executive teams that I don't know. There's a friend of mine, a guy I went to graduate school with. He's got a large team building contract with a company I won't name, and I work as a subcontractor to him. That's the place I still do subcontract work. So I'll go into this organization. I haven't met the team before. I'll meet them pre-interviews or pre-conversation with a leader. What's going on? Tell me where you want to be at the end of it. We do a survey of some kind for the team, and then we just go in there and have conversations about what we need to fix to become more effective as a team. So I like that work. I like the group work. I like the group dynamic. I sometimes call connecting back to the martial arts executive coach. Some one-on-one work can be like a kata, and I don't mean that it's repetitive, but you're kind of just one-on-one. There's less variables. You're going through this whatever process, and I call team building work like a bar fight because it's like you never know what's going to happen. You don't know the dynamic in the room and what's going on between the people, and where people have been honest. The team's been together for 10 years. There's bad blood, and I mean you just have no idea what's going to come out. So it's a lot more variable, a lot more dynamic than the typical one-on-one work is. And then finally, I have this niche offering, which is probably the thing I'm most excited about because I think there's a huge opportunity for it. I think it's an unmet need, and I'm trying to meet that need. And what that is it's helping executives going into new jobs. So how do you help them be effective in their first 100 days? Now, you have executives that are good. They're good engineers, or they're good marketing people, or they're good lawyers, or whatever. We don't get a lot of reps at going into a new company. Like, now, let's say you're a chief legal officer and you're going to switch jobs. You've been a chief legal officer at the company you've been at for probably 3, 4, 5 years or something like that. So it's been 5 years since you had to get your resume together, had to go interview, and had to go enter a new organization. And it's a unique time. And I feel like most people don't have great strategies for how to enter. So I've created an offering. I have different levels of support that the people can get from me, one-on-one support. And I'm really excited about that.
Love to hear it. It sounds like some great offerings. I'm curious, where do conferences and sales kickoffs fall within the three categories?
I really don't do those very much. I mean,
Okay.
I might help one of my clients. I have a client right now, and he had to do a sales kickoff, and I have some suggestions about framing that up and approaching it. So, but I really don't do that very much. I mean, the GCAI conference that you saw me speak at, one of the founders of GCAI, Cecilia Zanidi, was a client of mine, and she, like, to her credit, I mean, you saw the conference; it was lawyers as far as the eye could see, And how did a psychologist get in here, But she thought that would be a good conversation to have with these leaders. She was not only wanting to talk about her company and where it was going and where the product was going and get people together that are using it to generate excitement, but she also wanted to be of service. That's a credit to Cecilia. And she wanted to be of service. And so she thought me coming in to talk about what effective executive leadership looks like, especially, in the midst of this AI explosion that's all around us, she thought that would be of value. And at least one person, you in particular, seemed to find it of value.
Yeah, it was awesome. And yeah, since we're on the topic, why don't we pivot into legal? This is the Legal Leaders Podcast, after all.
Yes.
So I
I
guess
knew we'd get there at some point.
I guess yeah, like you said, lawyers as far as the eye could see, and that conference was mainly GCs and CLOs. A lot of folks who, I mean, frankly, law school doesn't teach you how to manage teams, but these people are managing sometimes huge teams.
Yep.
And so I'm just curious, like maybe for the person who's transitioning from the big law firm, from the corporate law job into an in-house role, or someone who's getting promoted in-house, like what do those conversations look like to help them succeed?
Yeah. So on my website, and maybe you might want to link to it in the podcast, in the show notes, if you do something like that. But I wrote it. I work with a lot of lawyers because Cecilia refers me to her friends and her network that are looking for coaching or looking to make some sort of career transition. So she refers me a lot. And so I end up working with a lot of lawyers, especially in this kind of career transition capacity that you're talking about. And one thing that struck me right away from my work with lawyers is how absolutely terrible their resumes were. I mean, terrible. And look, lawyers are super smart and they're super verbal, but their resume was terrible. And the reason it was terrible, and this is the article I wrote, the article is called Lawyers and the Mystery of the Missing Case. And the case that was missing is why I should hire you. So they would often talk about the law schools they went to, and I was responsible for this and responsible for that. And I mean, I even have seen lawyers' resumes that say, I negotiated contracts. No kidding, you negotiated contracts. That's your job, right? Like, so that no one cares about that. No one cares about what you were responsible for and that you negotiated contracts. And no one really in the business world cares about where you went to school. I mean, you should be proud of the great schools you went to and how high you graduated in your class. I'm not minimizing that at all. But in organizations, in companies, they're pattern matching you. They are looking at your resume and they know their problems. They know what they're up against, and they're looking at your resume and saying, has this guy or gal solved these problems? Or they all might know the environment, like high, maybe high tension, high performance, low timelines, incredible volumes of things that you have to get done, or international, or there's something. They know the situation. And they want to know, have you been in that situation and have you been able to figure it out? So in your resume and in your interviewing, you want to be able to talk about, I call it was, did, is. What was the situation? What did I do? And what were the results? That's the story you need to be able to tell consistently in your resume and in these conversations. And they're going like, oh, we got that situation. Oh, I love what she did. I love what he did. And look at those. She is talking about the numbers, the outcomes that the organization cares about. Not that it was a nice, neat contract or whatever. However, a lawyer might judge something, the quality of something. They're talking about the business impact of what they did. This is a person I want on my team.
What an interesting observation. Like, I guess as you talk about this, I'm like thinking like, well, in their defense, like they've had to pitch themselves to law firms, which are probably looking for something different than a business
Totally,
or a startup or whatever the case might
totally,
be. And
totally.
so they just don't know. You're 10 years into your career and you have to completely pivot.
Correct, correct. And I'm glad you mentioned that. I'm not sure I could be of a great assistance to someone that wanted to come out of law school and go clerk for a judge or go, work in that branch, or they wanted to just go for a law firm and go for partner track. I probably would be less useful in that environment. I'm talking about the lawyers that want to transition from law firms into corporate law or go from, doing corporate law to being a GC, which again is another completely different step.
Totally. Well, Dennis, let's talk about managing teams.
Okay.
I think one of my favorite things you said was like, and you said this many times, is people are literally dying for connection and find reasons to gather around the keg and celebrate your team and talking about empathy. Why is that so important?
Yeah. Well, so it is important. But just going back to the model I use, I just want to mention that briefly to put this comment in context, if you don't mind. So there's, I think effective executives have four things they need to balance and they need to be pretty good at. I mean, you might be able to be good at three and not at one, but usually you got to be pretty doggone good at all four. And so the first thing is you got to set the context. What is the strategy? What's important? What's not important? What are we going to do? What are we not going to do? Norms, values. How are we going to roll? Right? That's what an executive has to do. The second, and if they can't do that, if they can't articulate that, they're not leading. Then they have to execute effectively. So once they set that strategy, here's what we're going to do. Here's what we're not going to do. This is the work our company the lawyers in our company are going to do, and we're going to outsource the rest of the work to outside counsel. Okay, great. This is our work. That's their work. Great. Now we need to execute effectively on our work. It needs to be efficient. It needs to be effective. It needs to be what the customers need. Right. So how do you set up that dashboard? So you're measuring customer satisfaction, you're measuring productivity, you're measuring what the team is doing. How are you making the team better every year from an output standpoint? So that's leg number 2 of the stool. The third leg is you got to attract talent, develop that talent, and build that talent into a team. Leaders have to be good at doing that. And then finally, the last pillar is you have to manage yourself. Right. I think I mentioned at the conference that the coaching industry was born because there was executives that were pretty good at the 3 that I mentioned first, but they had some bad behavior. And so they'd get these coaches to come in and kind of polish them up, And so, in today's world, it's just not tolerated. It's just whatever your bad behavior is, and we don't need to list them. It's not tolerated. So you got to
Yeah.
find a way to manage yourself effectively. And what I mentioned at the conference was, how in the age of AI, that model is evolving. And I said, I think the 4 pillars are still the same, whether it's 20 years ago, 10 years ago, pre-AI or AI. You still have to do those 4 things, but the emphasis within each of those pillars change. And the thing that I mentioned, sorry, it took me so long to give the backdrop there to your question. But in this AI world, the thing that's really becoming important is you've got to have this generosity gene I talked about. You got to delight in the success of others. You got to really you got to come off the plane. You're not playing anymore. you're coaching. And right, you're not. Yes, you still have things you have to do. Yes, the chief legal officer still has to do lawyer-like things, but you've got a team under you now. And so, what needs to become more prominent in you is helping others be successful, creating a platform where others can find out how good they can be, delighting when they achieve success, not feeling threatened by that, feeling generous around that, generous with your increases, generous with your praise. And I said, and you got to celebrate everything, right? Because it's so hard right now. People are working from home, and there's so much coming at all of us, whatever the distractions are that people are trying to manage. So that your AI is not going to bring a keg in, at least not yet. And so look for reasons to. And of course, I was joking. I'm presenting to this conference of lawyers, and they're like, eyes are crossing, thinking about all the liabilities from bringing a keg in. But it's the spirit of find reasons to celebrate all the time.
Gotcha. And at risk of stating the obvious, why do you want to make people feel good about their jobs? Like, are they just not getting enough praise?
I think this is, I think there can be a couple answers to this question. So one is, how do you think about your job? How do you think about what you're here for? Not just the paycheck, but how do you think about what your role is as a leader? Are you about the team, or are you about managing your career? And so if you, and look, I'm not judging. I mean, there's plenty of people that like climbing the career ladder, and they make that the priority focus, and they don't worry about the team. They manage up. That's still quite common in organizations. But I think the best leaders are thinking about their team, and they're thinking about their team's effectiveness. They're also realizing, the best leaders are realizing that most of my outputs come from my team. They don't come from me. They come from my team. And so I want my team to be as effective as possible. And people generally work better when they are seen and recognized and acknowledged. They feel like they're learning and growing. They're being given opportunities to do things. And you've got to have a generosity of spirit to create that kind of environment. So that's,
Gotcha.
that's the first thing I would say. And the second thing I would say is, and this is another thing that I think people don't pay enough attention to in organizations, is when people leave, it's incredibly disruptive. Now, short-term productivity loss, somebody like they could take clients out the door. There could be revenue that's lost from it. You've got to go through the hiring process of bringing somebody in new and integrating them and getting them up to speed with what everyone is doing. Plus, if somebody's working for you and you're really pushing the envelope, you're pushing the use of AI, you've got the machine's working pretty well. When part of that machine leaves, dang, that's bad. So you want to attract and retain the talent you have. And it's not just praise for praise sake, but it's looking for reasons to celebrate. I mean, sometimes you also have to do the other thing, which is to ask for more for people. So it's not just saying, oh, like, somebody comes in and they're wearing a nice outfit or a nice jacket, or they got a new haircut. You're not just praising them for that. You're praising them for, good results, and sometimes also asking them for more.
Thank you for explaining that. And have you heard that? I'm sure you've heard this, but they talk about criticizing specifically and praising broadly. Do you believe in
Yeah.
that?
Yeah. Yes. I mean, in general, it just doesn't help to, I was listening to a podcast the other day, and this guy he's a writer, and he's going to writing workshops. And he says, if somebody tells you that this chapter is boring, it's not helpful. But if they tell you, well, it kept repeating itself. And so that's specific feedback that you can actually work with. But I also would say the thing I don't want, memes always, or whatever you want to call them, aphorisms, they always have a degree of truth to them, but they're not completely true, right? So,
Yeah.
criticize specifically, praise broadly. The praise doesn't land as well if I just say to you, Ollie, good job. But if I see something specific you did I saw that you wouldn't take no for an answer. I saw you went out to you actually went to the customer to work on this. I saw like how you pulled in resources from other places. I saw how you went about solving this problem, and it was really impressive. You feel seen, and that's what you have to do. Good job doesn't cut it.
That makes total sense. Thanks for the examples as well. Um, Cool, Dennis. Well, let's segment into the last thing I want to talk about. I have a lot of lawyers, law students, people who are earlier in their careers who
Yeah.
maybe just got into the workforce and stuff like that. I know you said that it doesn't matter who your client is or who you're working with, but you kind of your philosophy maybe is the same for everyone. But is there any kind of advice you direct at people who are like just starting out, who aren't leading teams, who are probably going to be ICs for the foreseeable future? What advice would you give to those folks?
Yeah. So, I mean, the first thing I would say is to try to say yes to almost everything, right? Try to say yes to everything. Now, you don't want to be abused. Don't want to be taken advantage of. So don't hear that wrong. But lots of stuff's going to come at you. Lots of problems that need to be solved are going to come at you. And you want to say yes to those because you're trying to, you know, learn as much, just get exposed to as like if it is corporate law, sorry, not a law firm, but if it is corporate law, you want to solve as many different kinds of business related problems as you can. That makes your resume look really rich. You don't want to just negotiate contracts, until the cows come home. So, right, try to say yes to a lot of different things that are coming at you. And the second thing I would say is, solve problems, like be seen as someone that can be counted on to solve problems, right? Take accountability. I got this. Here's when you'll get what you're going to get. Deliver what you say you're going to do when you say you're going to do it, and just be someone who can be counted on. Be a good team member.
Love it. Thank you so much for the advice, Dennis, and for coming on the podcast. Is there anything about your services you want to leave with my viewers before we end?
I don't think so. I wish them the best. I know that you're still in law school and looking forward to getting out, and a lot of your probably the people that are listening are also in law school or just getting started on the outside. Work on those resumes is what I tell you. It will help you. Make sure they tell a story about why whatever your next opportunity is that you want to go after, about why someone would want to hire you for that opportunity.
Incredible. Thank you so much, Dennis. Appreciate you coming on.